الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. So last week we started talking about the Sahabi Ibn-Hajar al-Hadrami Radhi-Allahu anhu, who was from Hadhrat. We also mentioned that he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam 2 times in Medina Munawwara, all the way from Hadhrat, which was about 1,000 miles one way. So that's altogether 4,000 miles in 2 trips, by camel and by foot. So it was a big sacrifice on his part. Once he came in the winter, once he came in the summer, and we cited the evidence for that from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then, since he had only been with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for a very short time period, so he probably stayed for max 2 weeks, 3 weeks, not more than that. And then he had to return with his caravan, which consisted of mainly his own tribal members from the tribe of Banu Kinda and people from Hadhrat. Then he returned. So within those 2 weeks, he was there for a very short time. So he tried to make the most of that time by doing what? Spending as much time as he could with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, watching him very, very carefully, seeing what he was doing, observing and recording it. And we see that he recorded it very well, because we have many ahadith by Ibn-Hajar in which he details how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed his salah in such a way that we don't even find most of the other Sahaba going into so much detail about the salah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I gave the example last week of how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed tashahhud. We know that from the hadith of Ibn-Hajar Radhi-Allahu anhu, right? There's other hadith as well, but this hadith is one of the most descriptive about how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam placed his hand while he was doing his tashahhud. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went down into sajda, he put his knees before his hands. So this type of detail was because he was observing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam very, very carefully, so he could get maximum benefit from his stay in Medina Munawwara. And of course, then the people who were in his tribe back home, they were relying on him to relay whatever he learned to them. So if he didn't observe properly, what is he going to teach them? So one of the other things we mentioned last week, and we ended with that, was that he once, while in one of these trips, one of the 2 trips that he made, he may have made more trips, but we only know of 2 of them. So in one of these trips that he made to Medina Munawwara, once in the winter, once in the summer, one of the other things that he noticed was, besides the salawat, was sometimes people would come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and would, if they had any type of issues with each other, they would bring it to his attention, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would establish a verdict, like a judge, between who is right and who is wrong, right? So these 2 people who came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought their case before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam while Ibn-Hajar was there at the time, and it seems, in fact it's very clear, that those 2 people who brought the case were actually from the same caravan that Ibn-Hajar came with when he came to Medina Munawwara, because both of these people who brought their case before him are from the tribe of Banu Kinda, which was from the Hadhrat region. One of them was from Banu Kinda, and the other one was from Hadhrat. He was Hadrami, which means that most likely that they were from the same caravan, because it seems very coincidental that he happens to be there and the people who brought the case happen to be also from the same area that he came from, right? So it's most likely that they came with him in the same qafila, and they were presenting their case before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He narrates, this is a hadith of Sahih Muslim, hadith of Abu Dawud. And it's narrated by Ibn-Hajar that a man came from Hadhrat and a man from Kinda to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Hadrami man said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's the plaintiff. He's presenting the case and he's making a claim. He says, "Inna hadha ghalabani ala ardin kanat li abi." This man has taken over the land of my father, and he's claiming it for himself, and he's cultivating it and using it for himself, but in reality, that's my land, because I inherited it from my father. So the Kindi, the defendant here, speaks up. He says, "Hi ardi fi yadi." This is my land, it's in my possession. أَزْرَوَهَا لَيْسَ لَهُ فِيهَا حَقٌّ. I'm cultivating it, I'm harvesting it, I'm using it for myself. He doesn't have any right over it. In other words, if it's in my possession and I'm using it and cultivating it, most likely it's mine. Because when you see somebody using something, you often consider what? That it's his. That's why he's using it. Nobody goes around using other people's things, most of the time at least. So, these are things that this land, I've been cultivating, I've been tilling it, I've been harvesting the crops from it. Why would it be his all of a sudden? I'm using it, it's mine. So, this Hadrami was not very happy. He said, no, that's not true. So Rasulullah, now you can see how kind of aggravated both of them are. And it's a very heated discussion here. How do you think Rasulullah ﷺ solves this case? He uses a very general principle that is established in Islamic legal law, right? He says to the plaintiff, which is the Hadrami, who's making a claim that this was my father's, was inherited by me, but this man usurped it. He says, Alaka bayyina, do you have any witness? Because a plaintiff is the claimant. When you make a claim, you have to present evidence. In a court of law, the evidence is going to be witnesses. You have to have witness. So do you have a witness? He says, no. I have no witness. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, well, if you don't have any witnesses, then there's only one other option. So he says, what? He said, the only other option is that he, the Kindi person, who presently is in possession of the land, he makes an oath and swears by the name of Allah that it's his land. So the Hadrami man just almost jumped, like, wait a second here. Ya Rasulullah, this man is a fajr. He's a transgressor. He doesn't care about the deen of Allah. He'll swear by the name of Allah 1,000 times and take whatever he wants from people. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Innahu fajirun." He's saying right in front of him too. Innahu fajir. What does fajir mean? Transgressor. He's a fasiq. He's a bad person. He's evil. He'll have no qualms about swearing by the name of Allah. He doesn't care about Allah. La yubali ma halafa alayhi laysa yatawarra'u min shay. Nothing's going to stop him. He's a fajir. He doesn't care about the deen. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Laysa laka minhu illa dhak." You don't have anything to prove that he's wrong, so I have no other choice but to make him swear by the name of Allah. And if he does, if he refuses, we know it's yours. But if he doesn't, and he does swear by the name of Allah, then we know that it's his. See? So, one of the things that we learn from this is that Islamic law is all based on zahir. Nobody knows what's in the hearts. Nobody knows who's lying and who's telling the truth. Right? Who's lying and who's telling the truth. This is why in usuli hadith, the principles of hadith, when one of the things that we learn and we teach in usuli hadith is that there is no such thing as sahih hadith fi nafs al-amr, which basically means there's no such thing as an authentic hadith in itself. You know, people say this hadith is from Bukhari, it's authentic. Nobody can say for sure that it's authentic. We're basing it on our knowledge of what we know about the narrators in that chain of transmission. As far as we know, those narrators are reliable, are authentic, they're pious people, they're trustworthy, every single one of them. Therefore, we believe that it's authentic. They have good memories and all the requirements for a narrator to be reliable, and every single one of them is like that. Therefore, the hadith is authentic. But the reason we will never say that the hadith is absolutely authentic without what? Any doubt. Without any doubt. We can't say that because nobody knows what's inside the hearts. Number one. Number two, How many people you know, I'm sure everybody can raise their hands, who are very pious, who are very reliable, who are very trustworthy, but they forget? Happens to everyone. That's just human nature. Even the best of us, the strongest of us, the most reliable of us, the most trustworthy and the pious of us will make mistakes and will forget. So is it possible that in that chain of transmission, all these narrators are very, very reliable, very, very trustworthy, but one of them made a mistake somewhere. One of them forgot somewhere. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, but we will never know. We have to base things on what? What we do know, and what we know is always based on what we can see and verify through our knowledge. But we can't verify everything. The only one who can verify everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the knower of the unseen. That's why there is going to be Yawmul Qiyamah, the day of judgment, the day of reckoning, because only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can truly know who is right and who is wrong in any case. Even the best judge, the most experienced judge, the most trustworthy judge will not be able to make the right judgment because there's just certain things he can never know as a human being. Only Allah can know them. So all matters will come in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, and then we will have real judgment about who is right and who is wrong. Who's on haqq, who's on batil. In any situation, who was right and who was wrong. So, this is why we are asked in these type of situations where there's a case going on and the plaintiff doesn't have a bayyana, that the other person, the defendant, does what? Qasam. Swears by the name of Allah. And when he swears by the name of Allah, he's held accountable for what he just said, for the oath that he made on the day of judgment. That watch out, tomorrow you're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you swore by the name of Allah, there's three people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not look at on the day of judgment. Who are those three people? One of them is one who swore by the name of Allah and used that oath to sell items that weren't what he claimed them to be. Or this type of person who swore by the name of Allah to keep a land that was not really his ownership. They'll be held accountable first. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not even look at them. Everybody is facing judgment. They're going to Jannah, they're going to Jahannam. But these people are just standing on the side, being completely ignored by the angels, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the situation is so tense and so harsh and so difficult that people actually are willing to say, just end this and put us one way or another. We just can't take the tension. Just get things started. So that in itself is the biggest punishment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that moment is not willing to look at these people who are swearing by the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lying. But on that day, everything will be known. So, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to the plaintiffs, he said, لَيْسَ لَكَ مِنْهُ إِلَّا ذَاكَ. You have no hold over him in anything except the qasam. Because there's no way we can know anything. That's all, the only hold you have over him is that if he does not make the qasam, you know that he is lying. And you are telling the truth. Otherwise, there's nothing you have on him. So this man, the kindi, he swore by the name of Allah, the land is mine, it's my ownership. This man is lying, he's not telling the truth. And then he turned away. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked at him and he said, Ama la'in halafa ala malin liya'kulahu zaliman. If this man swore by the name of Allah over some wealth, meaning in this case over some land, so that he could usurp it and take over it, zaliman, in the state that he is not the real owner of it, لَيَلْقَيَنَّ اللَّهَ, he will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, وَهُوَ أَنْهُ مُعْرِضٌ, in the state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will refuse to acknowledge his existence. Like I said, everybody else, judgment is being taken. And they're going one way or another. Even if they're going to Jahannam, at least they know they're going somewhere. These people are just standing there. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And the tension is just making them want to explode inside. Let's get things started. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just ignoring them completely. Right? That's the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, they're eventually going to go one way or another. But that in itself is a punishment that Allah ta'ala is going to put them through first before He throws them into Jahannam. This is a hadith of Abu Dawud. Wa'il ibn Hujr Radhi-Allahu anhu was present at the time while this case was taking place before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now going back to the journey itself. Rasulullah, Wa'il ibn Hujr Radhi-Allahu anhu came to Medina Munawwara and he met Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the first time. Now, we don't know which trip it was. Was it the one in the winter or the one in the summer? But in the first trip that he made, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very, very happy with Wa'il ibn Hujr Radhi-Allahu anhu. The reason he was happy, and I think I mentioned this last time, the reason he was happy was because he said, طَائِعًا غَيْرَ مُكْرِهٍ. He came on his own just to accept Islam. Nobody forced him. In other words, this person has eagerness to learn the truth. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved the most. That I didn't have to go send someone to them and tell them about Islam. He came on his own. And what more could Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ask for? Right? There are people that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would spend night and day with, like the leaders of Makkah Mukarramah, trying to explain Islam to them, but they just didn't want to listen. They would turn their backs on him. They would persecute him. And he would still go at it, still go and talk to them and explain things to them. And that's what Abasa wa Tawalla, the whole tafsir of Abasa wa Tawalla is about. He was talking to a person, one of the leaders, prominent members of Quraysh, and Abdullah ibn Maktoum came along and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned away from him because he was talking to this person and he was trying to convince him to accept Islam. And here, Wa'il ibn Hujr came up on his own. Made Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mission a lot easier. And then we also mentioned that Wa'il ibn Hujr happened to be one of the leaders, because he was his father was one of the kings in the kingdom of Hadhrat. So if he was to accept Islam, that would be a good influence for the other people in his region and his own tribe. The funny thing about this Wa'il ibn Hujr, before I go on, is that we don't know his tribe. We just know he's from Hadhrat. In most cases, when I talk about a Sahabi, I can tell you which tribe he's from. Whether he's from the Ansar, or he's from the Muhajirun, or even otherwise, we can mention which tribe he's from. We were talking about Uqba bin Amr al-Juhani Radhi-Allahu anhu, right before Ramadan, he was from the tribe of Banu Juhayna, right? Which was neither Makki or Madani, right? But he was from the tribe of Banu Juhayna. Wa'il ibn Hujr Radhi-Allahu anhu, we only know him from where he came from. His nisbah is based on where he came from, not on his tribe. So it seems like they didn't have the custom in his area or his region was not to go by their tribal names, but to go by where you were from. And since Hadhrat was a very special valley, maybe that's why the attribution is made to his tribe. So he's known as Al-Hadrami. Even the person who was a plaintiff in this case, he was Hadrami. He's not known from which tribe. He's not known that which tribe he was from, right? As opposed to the defendant was known that he was from Banu Kinda. But this man, the claimant, the plaintiff was what? From Hadhrat. So he was known as Hadrami. But which tribe, we have no idea. So it seems like all the people from Hadrami were just Hadramis. That was probably their plan too. Wallahu alam. Anyhow, so Wa'il ibn Hujr himself narrates, لما بلغنا ظهور رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خرجت وافدا. When I found out that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has migrated to Medina Munawwara and now he has gained power and he established his state in Medina Munawwara, he said, خرجت وافدا عن قومي. I came out as a delegation on behalf of my people, my tribe, my region, to Medina Munawwara. حتى قدمت. I arrived in Medina Munawwara. He said, but even before I arrived in the city, I saw a group of Sahaba, companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, standing in the outskirts of the entranceway into Medina Munawwara, welcoming me, and they knew exactly who I was and what I looked like, and they were waiting for me. And they said, قد بشرنا بك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من قبل أن تقدم علينا بثلاثة أيام. Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم had given us glad tidings about you 3 days before you were coming. Even though Wa'il ibn Hujr had not given any information or report ahead of time. They didn't have cell phones in those days, right? That you could phone, I'm coming. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam miraculously knew that Wa'il ibn Hujr is coming, and he informed all the Sahaba, and then some of the Sahaba went to the outskirts, especially to welcome into Medina Munawwara. So one can imagine how much Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praising him in front of the Sahaba, that they were looking forward to seeing him. And then the Sahaba mentioned, he said that the Sahaba mentioned that Rasulullah said to us, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ وَائِلْ ibn Hujr, that Wa'il ibn Hujr has come to you. So go and meet him. Then he says, I entered the city of Medina Munawwara and I met Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَرَحَّبَ بِي, he welcomed me very warmly, وَأَدْنَا مَجْلِسِي, and he sat me down next to him, وَبَسَطَ لِي رِدَاءَهُ, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rarely ever did this, and he laid out his shawl for me to sit next to me and sit on my shawl. The only other time I can remember where Rasulullah did that was for his sister, Shayma, and for his mother, foster mother, Halimatu Sa'diyah Radhi-Allahu anha. And one knows their status, right? That one was his foster mother, one was his Radai sister. So they were related to him. And Shayma actually was his sister who took care of him when he was very small in Banu Sa'd. And when she was captured in the battle of Hawazin, Rasulullah, she said, don't touch me. I am the sister of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they said, what's your proof? She said, bring me to him and I'll tell you the proof. So they brought Shayma Radhi-Allahu anha to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they said that she's saying that she's your sister. And he said, do you have any proof that you're my sister? She said, yes. I have a bite mark that you made once I was holding you. And then she showed him the bite mark and he remembered. And then he laid out his shawl for her and she sat on it. Then he gave her a choice. But that's another discussion. Inshallah, we'll talk about that some other time. Same thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does for Wa'il ibn Hujr. Summa da'a bin nas. Now he sits Wa'il ibn Hujr radiyallahu anhu next to him. And then he calls the people to the masjid. Everybody come to the masjid. So everybody gathers around Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Wa'il ibn Hujr, who's sitting next to him. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ascends the mimbar, the pulpit, وَأَطْلَعَنِي مَعَهُ, and he takes me along with him. So he holds my hand and tells me, come on the pulpit with me. وَأَنَا مِن دُونِي, and I'm right next to him. Then ثُمَّ حَمِدَ اللَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى, he praises Allah. And he says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ هَذَا وَائِلْ ibn Hujr, this is Wa'il ibn Hujr. أَتَاكُم مِّن بَلَادٍ بَعِيدَةٍ, he has come from far away. مِّن بَلَادِ Hadhrat, all the way, 1,000 miles away from Hadhrat. طَائِعًا غَيْرَ مُكْرَهٍ, he's come on his own. I never called upon him. He did not come out of force or compulsion, on his own. And بَقِيَّةُ أَبْنَاءِ الْمُلُوكِ, and he is one of the remaining sons of the kings. Meaning he's a prince of the royal family over there. Barakallahu fiki ya Wa'il. May Allah put barakah in you, O Wa'il. Wa fi waladik, wa fi waladi waladik. And your children, and your children's children, your grandchildren. It's a big dua from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How happy and overjoyed he was to meet and see Wa'il ibn Hujr. Only because of this one reason. Ta'i'an ghayra mukrahin. Can you imagine? There is a teacher who teaches Quran. And a child comes to him and says, I want to learn Quran. That's a miracle. Most of them it's the parents who send them and then try to use the excuses to come late. And if they come on time, they don't study properly. And here this child comes to you and says, I want to learn Quran. Teach me. How fast do you think he's going to be able to learn Quran? If he has that level of eagerness, right? In another way, he says, هذا وائل ibn Hujr سيد الأشباء جاءكم لم يجئكم رهبة ولا رغبة. This is Wa'il ibn Hujr, Sayyidul Ashibba, the leader of the youth, meaning that he was very young. So this is the evidence that I used in the previous session where we talked about, when you were talking about his age, how when he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was very, very young. He has come to you, لم يجئكم رهبة ولا رغبة. He has not come to you out of fear or out of raghba. Raghba means eagerness, but here means greediness, that he wants something from you, like some material or worldly thing. Yes, some people came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on their own, but they were seeking something. We want a whole bunch of camels, give me some money. Or one of them will accept Islam, and will support you, but in return, when you get power, then we will become your khalifas. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no, that's not the way it works. This is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives position to whoever He wishes. Anyhow, جَاءَ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ. He has come out of love for Allah and His Rasul, and then he's speaking to his own tribe specifically. He says, Ya Bani Hashim, Ya Bani Abdul Muttalib. He has come to you, this man, وَأَنْتُمْ تُدْعُونَ إِلَى الْإِيمَانِ. You were called towards the deen. He's talking to his own tribe, his own clan. You people were called towards the deen, فَلَا تُجِئُونَ. And you never came towards the deen. And look at him. He's not even from my family. He's not from my clan. He's not from my tribe. And he came on his own. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives hidayah to whomever He wishes. When He puts that love for the deen in the heart of someone, then it doesn't matter where they live, they will change. They'll come towards the deen, it doesn't matter where it is. And if there's a person whom Allah does not want to give hidayah, he could be sitting right next to the people of hidayah, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they will not benefit one bit. Like Abu Jahl, like his own uncle Abu Lahab, did not benefit one bit. If anything, they were harmed more than they gained benefit by their opposition to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's telling his own tribe and clan that you should be ashamed of yourselves. That here you had the deen right in front of you and you didn't take it. And look how people are coming from far away to learn the deen of Allah. So value what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Value what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. You know what people do? This is a very common trend in North America is most of the time communities will invite speakers from outside. And those speakers will come, give a talk, and go back home and everybody will be, mashallah, what a great bayan, what a great talk. But what about the imam of the masjid? Who gives talks every Jummah, plus he has youth sessions, plus he has tafsir sessions, plus he's spending night and day praying, leading the 5 times salah, and whatnot. But no appreciation for that. And this person comes just once in a year or twice a year and mashallah, so much praise, so much respect, so much appreciation. Right? Take benefit from the imam who's with you. He may have more knowledge than the speaker who just coming. The thing is, the speaker is very articulate, so people think he has a lot of knowledge. The imam may not be as articulate, maybe not as eloquent as him, but that doesn't mean he has less knowledge. Speaking is a totally different thing from having knowledge. It's 2 different things. So now, he stayed for a couple of days in Medina Munawwara. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Muawiyah Radhi-Allahu anhu to take care of Wa'il ibn Hujr. Now this is interesting because Muawiyah Radhi-Allahu anhu accepted Islam after Fath Makkah, which means that Wa'il ibn Hujr came after 8th Hijri. 8th Hijri. Somewhere around there, near the end. Which means that he could not have come more than 2 times because Rasulullah passed away in the 11th. And he came in the 8th or 9th. So, if he came within those 3 years, how many times is he going to come? Especially when the journey was so long. And of course, in those days, transportation was not like it is today. So max, he may have come 3 times, but no more than that. Anyhow, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam put Amir Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu, who was not Amir at that time, in charge of it. And Muawiyah was very poor. So he narrates his story. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu is narrating this story. He says, while Ibn Hujr was with me, فَخَرَجَ مُعَاوِيًا رَاجِلًا مَعَهُ وَائِلْ ibn Hujr عَلَى نَاقَةِ رَاكِبًا. While Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was taking him to his house where he was going to stay, Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was walking on foot, and Wa'il ibn Hujr was on his camel. So Muawiyah radiallahu anhu complained to the guest, Wa'il ibn Hujr, that the sun is very hot and it's reflecting on the sand, and I'm having a hard time walking because it was the blazing heat of the noontime in the summer. So it's obviously not winter time when he came. So he's saying, please, can I sit on the camel with you? So what does Wa'il ibn Hujr say? He says, Ibta'il dhill al-naqa. Why don't you sit in the shade of my camel? Walk behind me in the shade of my camel. He's saying, walk in the shade of my camel, that will help you a little bit. But he's not allowing him to sit on the camel. So Muawiyah radiallahu anhu says, وَمَا يُغْنِيكِ وَمَا يُغْنِي ذَلِكَ عَنِّي. What harm does it do to you if you allow me to sit on your camel with you? So Wa'il says, uskut, quiet. فَلَسْتَ مِنْ أَرْدَافِ الْمُلُوكِ. You are not from the people who can be passengers of the kings. See, Wa'il ibn Hujr is new to Islam, so he still recognizes his own status, that I am from the royal family. So he's telling him, you're not from the royal family. And even in the royal family, when they have a royal mount, not everybody can sit on there. They have special passengers. Ardaf al-Muluk, right? You're not one of them. Later on, after Rasulullah passed away, during the Khilafah Amir Muawiyah, we're talking 41, 42 Hijri. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's Khilafah ended at 60 Hijri, so somewhere between 45 and 60 Hijri. So many years later, Wa'il ibn Hujr went to Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. And Wa'il ibn Hujr had only met Muawiyah radiallahu anhu once, 2 times during this journey. Actually 1 time. We don't know the second time if he met him or not. So that's the only time he ever met. Now he's meeting him how many years later? 40, 50 years later, for the second time. So Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, during his Khilafah, Wa'il ibn Hujr radiallahu anhu comes to him, and Muawiyah radiallahu anhu recognized him. Oh, I remember him, right? And then Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he welcomed him and he gave gifts for the other people that had come with him in his caravan. And then he said to him, by the way, do you remember me? He said, no. He said, do you remember when you first came to Medina Munawwarah to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah appointed a person to take you to his house, and that person asked you if they could ride in your company? He said, you're not that person. He said, I am the person. I'm the same person. So he says to me, he's apologizing. Wa'il ibn Hujr is apologizing to Muawiyah. He said, I had some of the filth of this being from the royal family, meaning this arrogance inside of me. And he says, فَوَدِدْتُ أَنِّي كُنْتُ حَمَلْتُ بِينِ يَدَيْ. I wish now that if that were to happen over again, I would have definitely have sat him down next to me on my camel. So, this is a story of how the little between Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and Wa'il ibn Hujr. So Wa'il ibn Hujr came to him much later, and he remembered him, and he actually gave him gifts. But Wa'il ibn Hujr فَأَبَى مِنْ قُبُولِ جَائِزَتِهِ. He refused to accept those gifts. So he said, don't worry about it. What's past is past. No need to feel embarrassed or ashamed. He said, no, it's not that. It's that يَأْخُذُهُ مَنْ هُوَ أَوْلَى بِهِ مِنِّي فَأَنَا فِي غِنًى عَنْهُ. He said, the reason I'm taking is not because of that. It's because there are people who are more needy than me. I'm not in need of anything, alhamdulillah. So give it to someone who really is needy of this. Give the gifts to them. It may have been some monetary gifts, some money, or some other things like that. So he said, give it to someone else. I am not in need of it. Jazakumullah khair, ahsan jaza. Another thing we know about him, Wa'il ibn Hujr radiallahu anhu, was that when he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the first time, he had very, very long hair. Very long hair. Like equal to the length of women's hair, all the way below his shoulders. So he says, I came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam one day, during those days when he was visiting Medina Munawwara, and he says, waliya sha'r, had long hair. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, dhubab, dhubab. Now the word dhubab can have many meanings. So he said, dhubab, dhubab, meaning it's another way of saying, not good, not good. So he said, immediately I went. فَأَخَذْتُ مِنْ شَعْرِي ثُمَّ جِدْتُهُ. I cut my hair off. And then I came back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So obviously if somebody has really long hair and suddenly he's got a shaved head, then you wonder like, what happened? Right? So he said, what happened to your hair? He said, Ya Rasulullah, سَمِعْتُكَ تَقُولُ ذُبَابْ فَظَنَنْتُكَ تَعْنِينِي. I heard you say dhubab, not good, not good, and I thought you were referring to me. So Rasulullah was sitting in the gathering and talking to the people, and he said the word dhubab, and while Ibn-Hajar thought that he was talking to him, whereas in reality he wasn't. He said, ma'anituka, I wasn't referring to you, but hadha ahsan. It's good you did this. It's good you cut your hair. While Ibn-Hajar Radhi-Allahu anhu lived during, as we mentioned last week, he lived during all the way up to the Khilafah of Amir Muawiyah Radhi-Allahu anhu. And he died during the Khilafah of Amir Muawiyah Radhi-Allahu anhu, which means that he was present during the battles that took place between Ali Radhi-Allahu anhu and Aisha Siddiqa Radhi-Allahu anha in the Battle of Jamal, and also between Ali Radhi-Allahu anhu and Amir Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin. So he was present at that time. Did he take part in the battles? There's difference of opinion by the historians. Some say that he did, some say that he didn't. But one thing is for sure, he did side and supported Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he happened to be settled down in Kufa as well, and that was the capital of Ali radiallahu anhu, and the Khilafah of Ali radiallahu anhu. But whether he actually took part in the battle, that's not known. So one of the people that was chosen by Amir Muawiyah as the Amir of Kufa, his name was Ziyad. He was not a good person. So he did not like him. While Ibn-Hajar did not like Ziyad as a governor of Kufa. And he wanted him to leave and go somewhere else. But he didn't want to say it directly. He said it in a very subtle way. So once, it's said about Wa'il ibn Hujr, Zajiran Husna Zajri. He was very good at admonishing people, but in such a subtle way that they didn't know that he was admonishing them. Meaning he's telling you to do something, or telling you don't do this, but he won't say it directly. He has a really nice way of saying it so you don't realize that he's admonishing you. So once, خرج يوما من عند زياد بالكوفة وأميرها المغيرة فرأى غرابا ينعق. He saw a crow that was cawing. Caw, caw. You know how crows make noise? So he came from Ziyad, who was the big guy in Kufa, and when he came out, he saw this crow and he was cawing, so he went back to Ziyad. And he said, Ya Abul Mughira, which was the kunya of Ziyad. And he says, هَذَا غُرَابٌ يُرَحِّلُكَ مِنْ هَاهُنَا إِلَىٰ خَيْرٍ. There's a crow that I just met outside, and he's making noise. I think he was telling you to leave here and go to a better place. It was another way of saying, get out of here. He was basically telling him, get out of here. We don't want you here in Kufa. But he wanted to say it in a very nice way, so this is how he said it. So a few days later, it just so happened that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, Khalifa, at that time Amir al-Mu'mineen, his messenger came to Kufa for Ziyad, telling him that you are no longer the governor of Kufa, go to Basra. And Wa'il ibn Hujr said, Alhamdulillah. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfills the words of the pious ones. Right? Anyhow, this is the story of Wa'il ibn Hujr. As we mentioned, he passed away during the Imarat and Khilafat of Amir Muawiyah. We don't know the exact date, but we do know that Amir Muawiyah became Khalifa in 45 Hijri, And it went for 15 years, all the way up to 60 Hijri. So sometime between 45 and 60 when Wa'il ibn Hujr anhu passed away. As we mentioned, he was very, very young when he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, very young could mean 20, it could mean 30, because that's also considered young. And if he lived another 45 years after that, so he may have been what? 70, 65. Allahu alam. No, Allah knows best. So inshallah, this is the story of Wa'il ibn Hujr. Inshallah, next week we will start with another Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakumullah khair. Ahsan jaza.